I'd like to welcome a pretty unique guest that I have the honor of speaking to right now, and his name is Daniele Bolelli, the great Italian philosopher, teacher, professor, everything, MMA specialist, black belt in multiple disciplines. But Daniele, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on, man.
Honor is mine, AJ. My pleasure.
So, to give a little background of how I became, I guess, aware of Daniele, I kind of became a Joe Rogan podcast fanboy a while back, and Daniele was on. I don't know when your first appearance was, but I kind of found you on there and was like, man, this dude's something. There's something up about this guy. What an interesting. Obviously, your thick Italian accent.
Yeah, just a tiny bit.
Will make you stand out a bit, but then when I hear what you were, I was hearing everything you're saying. I'm like, man, this dude is he's got some awesome, like, the ways you look at the world and what you think. So I followed you through there and saw you on Joe's podcast multiple times. Kind of followed you on others. You host your own now called the
Yep.
Drunken Taoist that is huge. I know it's blown up from the jump. So what would you say? What would you say your job title is if you call what you do a job? I know you work your ass off, but what would you narrow it down to a couple things, I guess? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I guess primary thing how I make a living is I've been teaching college for the last 13 years or so. So that has been number one source of income. And then I've been writing. So I published my first book in the US in 2003. Then I had a kind of a long gap till the next one. And then now I'm publishing a little more regularly. So I published one in 2011, one in 2013. I'm hoping to get one out in 2015. And then podcasting. So I'm kind of like, all over the place.
You're doing everything. You are. And so your books, I know you said your first one that you put out in America was what, 2002, did you say?
2003, yeah.
Three. So you put that one out, and you came over. When did you come over here? From what I know, you're from Milan, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And I came over here in 1992, which, if you can believe it, it's kind of funny because I still speak like a fob, like I just got off the boat. But somehow, I actually been here a really long time because it's now, I actually have spent more of my life in the United States than I have in Italy by now.
I like it. Well, what I heard, I think on one of your early podcasts with Joe, you were saying that you're like Arnold. Arnold doesn't want his accent to go away. Don't you want to hold on to that thing?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I kind of said it halfway joking in the sense that, yes, there is an element that I get from a lot of American women, how they dig the accent. So, I mean, why would I try hard to get rid of something that women like? But then there's another part that is really, I would have to try really hard because as funny as that may sound to anyone else who's listening, I actually don't hear my accent. I think I speak perfect, flawless English, except that then, when I'm speaking, when I hear a recording of myself, I go like, oh my God, how the hell do I really speak like that? But, when I'm speaking this way, I don't hear it. So it would be hard to correct because I'm not exactly catching on while I'm saying it.
Were you, 19, 18 when you came over here?
18, yeah. I was 18 when I moved. I was 92, so now I'm 40, yep.
Did you speak English when you came here, or did you have to learn all from scratch?
I kind of spoke English. I mean, I spoke English like order at a restaurant kind of English, where I could get around, but I remember just the first month where like the phone, the house phone would ring back when we had home phones and it wasn't all cells. I would just stare at that thing in fear, like, oh shit, do I really have to pick that thing up and actually speak in English and somebody's going to talk really fast at me? Oh my God, panic. So, my English was very, very so-so when I first arrived. And then, of course, after a year here, you talk to people, you watch TV, everything, you start catching on quick.
Do you have anybody here that you can speak Italian to?
Yeah, my mom lives in US. My dad still lives in Italy, but my mom lives in US. So, yeah, that works out. I get to speak with her, and then the wonders of technology, thanks to Skype, every morning I'll chat with my dad real quick before I take my daughter to school. So we always say hi to our grandpa and stuff. So it's a whole new universe compared to how I grew up. The whole idea that you can chat with somebody across the world now it's so normal and no big deal. It was completely foreign just a few years ago. It's quite a trip.
And it's free now, which is what kids don't understand. How about the long distance calls? I mean, we weren't allowed to make them. If we knew someone that went out of the country, or my dad went out of the country to travel, we weren't allowed to make those calls. That was astronomical prices to make them.
Exactly.
I remember my parents won a trip to Hawaii a few times through my dad's work, and it was like they would call once throughout the whole 10-day trip. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, you guys alive? Okay, I love you. Bye. Boom. Like that was all you could do. And I mean, look at us now.
Yeah, get it over with. Each word costs too much money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was like collect calls, everything that aren't in existence anymore. Yep. But you mentioned your dad there. I've read up a little bit on your dad. Your dad's name's Franco, right?
Yep.
And he is a big time author, philosopher. What is he? He's still over in Italy?
Yeah, man. He was, talk about the difficult job description. He was, I remember when I was a kid and they would ask me, what does your dad do for a living? I would be like, because, there was no job description. At least with me, you can make it sound semi-normal. It's like, okay, you teach college. That's something recognizable. With him, he would be all over the place. He would be writing, organizing kind of cultural events and conferences and things like that. But, there were 15 things he did, and not one of them was the job. It was a mix of a bunch of different things. So I was always puzzled by how he kind of was his job. There was no, he was fitting somebody else's, that somebody else could take over. He was the job. That's it. That's how he does things. Still to this day, it's pretty funny.
Does he have any desire to move over to the U.S.?
He would like to, for the sake of being close to me, to my daughter. I think it's hard just because his whole life is built in Italy and he's still working there. And it's all based on, face-to-face communication. A lot of it is that you have to be there for people to remember you and, involve you in projects and stuff like that. So he's not too happy about that because, whenever he comes, he never want to leave. He's so happy. He hang out with my daughter. My daughter is running him like a slave. He's just like, you're mine. And, for the next 2 weeks, he doesn't get a second of himself. But somehow he's one of those guys who manage to play with kids all day and still have energy at the end of the day. So he has a blast doing that. He likes it. And, so, yeah, it has been one of the things that is not much we can do about it, because that's where his life is. But we try to see him a bunch. He come to visit at least once to twice a year minimum. We go there in the summer for maybe 4 to 5 weeks. So, we get to see him a good chunk.
Geez, 4 to 5 weeks. So when you go over, do you stay with your dad? You stay with family?
Yep. Yeah, I stay with my dad. It's that's the nice part. I try not to teach in summer. It's I don't care whether I made enough money or not during the year. Summer is sacred. Summer is off. Come mid-June, see you everybody. See you again at the end of August. Summer is one of the things that, growing up in Italy, that's kind of how it is. You get at least a month-long vacation and kids get a lot longer. And to me, I grew up with this idea that summer is for you. It's to recharge your batteries and get back into remember who you really are, away from all the things that you do. And so I stick to that principle. I did for a few years where I was trying to work through the summer, and then now I'm like, not worth it.
How was that? I always wonder how that culture changes, or the difference between European countries and. So you're over in Italy. How do they view things like that? Like summer breaks, I know, are big, like you're talking about. Here, it's like summer is activities all day, every day. Your kids are in basketball camp, baseball camp, whatever. You're into, obviously, different martial arts and things like that, I know. But do they not value that? Or do they value, like you're saying, the get some experiences, recharge, and go out and explore things and take that time off more than we do here in America?
Yeah, I think some of it is structural. I don't even think it's culture. I think people here would like it. But, the average job in US gives you about 2 weeks off. 2 weeks is not that much. So if the average job in Italy start giving you already maybe 4 to 5 weeks, that's a whole different game. You have so much more time. And, in 2 weeks, you barely have time to get used to this. Oh, wow, what it is that it feels like to be me without having 3 million things to do all day long. And by the time you start figuring out, boom, you're back at work. if by that time you still had 2-3 more weeks to go, there's a lot you can do with yourself where you start remembering what it's like to be human away from work. And I dig that model. I mean, it's I really think that it does wonders for somebody's mental health. And we're not talking a lot. We're talking 2-3 weeks more a year. It's not a huge difference. You know, you work 46 weeks a year rather than 48 or 50. It's not a huge difference, but it does make a huge difference in terms of how you feel.
Oh, I'm sure if they actually did like legit studies on it, and they had companies that took the extra break and did like a 2-week, extra vacation, and they compared that with the productivity of companies that don't. I'm sure in America we would have more productivity for the people that got the time off, because when they were there, they're actually working and passionate and not run down by some CEO that's just killing them every day and looking over their shoulder.
That's what I would do. If I was an employer, I would be like, you know what, you guys can take 2 extra weeks if you get the job done by that point. Whatever it is that needs to be done, show me good quality job by this deadline. And if you get it done, extra time. I don't care. Just go on vacation, have fun with your family.
Yeah, I try to tell that. I ask my dad that all the time. My dad works in sales, and he has the whole thing to where they feel like, I'm like, do you guys have like a time when you all like get off, you punch out at 5? He's like, well, I don't, because he's been there 30 years, so he's worked his way up the ladder. He's like, I gotta work till I get my job done. Sometimes that's midnight, but other people will sit there and we call it guarding their desk. They don't want to leave if the boss hasn't left. And like my brother and him, and they tell me, I just want my guys to get their work done. If they get their work done, I don't care if they take a long lunch break. I don't care if they're gone early. As long as you're working, you're doing well, and you're hitting your goals, do whatever you want. I want you to go hang out with your family. And I wish there was more of that. And I don't have a whole lot of experience in the business world, but I saw it when I was in school, high school, college, everything. And I see it from my buddies that work in different like business jobs, that they're like, they'll be texting me, I can't go yet, man. I can't come over. My boss is still here. He's killing me. What are you doing for the company? Like, nothing. Sitting here texting you.
It's like checking the internet and research and
So it's like, what is that? That's some cultural thing we have here, or just something that got started, you think, in America, where people are like, well, that's the biggest. One of the answers that annoys me more than anything is if I ask a question, I'm like, why do we do it this way? And they'll say, well, that's what we've always done. And I'm like, don't you think you should question that statement right there?
Yeah, that would be healthier right there, because maybe there's a good reason to do it that way, and maybe you are just doing it out of inertia and there's no point. So no, I agree with you, absolutely. And some of that stuff, I saw it, a friend of mine works for Twitter, and I saw how they do things, and I was like, you got to be kidding me, this is awesome. Like, he would just flat out, middle of the day, just tell his boss, I'm going to go visit my friend for 3 hours, so see you, just, I'm going to be busy, I just want to go hang out. And his boss would be like, no problem, because he knows that he'll get the job done, that he'll produce high quality work. So he doesn't care how he gets it done. Stay in your underwear at home all day long if that makes you happy. As long as you get it done, that's what counts.
Yeah, maybe there is a little bit of a shift going. Like you said, he worked for Twitter, and this whole startup / tech companies, I think they do kind of have that feel for it. Even it's like shown in movies. I got to visit Google in New York City, and man, it was like my wife and I were there, and we were just in awe. We were like, we feel like we're in a movie right now. We went and saw their lunchroom. They feed them all every day. All their meals they don't make them pay. They have crazy every option possible, and it's like, I'm looking around. I'm 30 right now, and I was like, I'm the oldest guy in this room almost. And they were so like it wasn't real. It wasn't even living in reality. And I was like, no wonder you guys are making billions a day. Probably you guys are so productive. And they said, they're like, we work.
Yeah,
but
of course.
We're put in the best possible situation to make us successful, I think, and they see that from the top. And maybe, I don't know, Daniele, maybe you're getting that train moving in the right direction. You're teaching those young kids. Do you see that in college, like that, towards that at all?
Yeah, it's tricky. I don't think institutionally it's encouraged, because institutionally schooling is so old-fashioned the way it's set up. Is really just jump through a bunch of hoops. Is not about, meaningful work that educates you as a human being. It's about really just how many hoops you can jump through so that we can give you the diploma at the end. In a lot of cases, there really is no point other than showing that you're tough and you can take a lot of really boring assignments for a long period of time. I mean, there's something to be said for that resilience, but that's not really education.
You're not learning, yeah.
No, so I cherish the opportunity when, I can do something different. I'm really thrilled with that. But when I look around, I see other individuals who do it for their own sake because that's how they want to teach. But I see it's not how it's designed to be. It definitely is, in many ways, whenever good education takes place, it takes place despite the institution, not because of the institution. Because at an institutional level is, it's very dry.
And it seems like it's all about test scores and passing their test score. Yep. When it comes, especially like high schools and middle schools, they want to be considered a blue ribbon school. So we got to have. That's why you see this corruption now. Teachers got caught. Are you, like, say you're teaching at UCLA or whatever a class? Do they hamstring you with, like, do they give you the whole syllabus like day one and say this is what you have to teach on this day, or do they kind of give you freedom?
It used to be that there was a ton of freedom. I love my job. I was like, this is great. I get to do what I want, basically. And as long as students are happy, nobody complains. This is great. So it used to be pretty much complete freedom as long as nobody's complaining. But it's changing rather quick in the last few years and not in a good way. There's a lot more bureaucracy. There's a lot more looking over your shoulder and micromanaging and doing stuff that really serves no purpose from an educational standpoint whatsoever. It's just because there are a lot of administrators who have to justify getting a big paycheck, and they have to make some work that makes sense. So it's like, look, we are doing this and that. Well, yeah, none of that stuff is useful to students or to anybody else, but I'm glad we're doing that, So, yeah, I'm at a place where for the longest time I was teaching college and I felt like, if they pay me no money, I would still enjoy doing this because it's so much fun. That phase now is gone. I would say now I'm thinking about the paycheck because it's not nearly as fun as it was because of this increasingly bureaucratic aspect that exists as part of the academic culture.
I see that, and I don't claim to have any answers. That's why I talk to smart guys like you. But I wonder, so my wife, one of her good friends, is a second grade teacher, and I go into her classroom, and she's, God bless her, I tell her, I'm like, you waste so much time because she's so prepared and she's so organized. I go in there and her whole workbook, her whole calendar thing, she has it written down. She has her own notes written for every day of the whole school year. And I'm like, don't they give you the worksheets and the tests and everything you have to give? She's like, oh yeah. I was like, so you don't make up any of those? It's all what they give you? She's like, yeah, I can't make up anything on my own. I was like, what are you doing what are you writing down? What are you planning? You don't get to really do anything. She's like, oh, I know. I just have to teach off the worksheets and teach them through these worksheets and make sure they hit these markers throughout the year. And I was like, what do you need to mail it in there? Like I said, God bless her. She is making a difference because she gets all the kids love her, and so she's having a positive impact on them. But when it comes to schooling, I don't know what she can do. She's handcuffed. What? And I have young kids. I have a 4 and 2-year-old, and I'm like, I don't know. That's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today, because I want to know what can I do to help my kids get ahead maybe a little bit, because I know how hard school was for me to sit there in that atmosphere. And when I think back right now, I'm like, luckily I graduated. A lot of my buddies and teammates that I play football with did not graduate. They left a quarter early, maybe a year early. And some of them talk about possibly going back to school and thinking that they're going to go and sit in class from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. every day. And I was like, there's no way I could ever do that in school for something that I'm not passionate about. And I know they're going to make me take classes that I'm not passionate about. So I don't know. How can we change anything though? How can, at least individually, can we do anything different for our kids?
I mean, a lot of it is navigating around the many, many obstacles that are along the path, because the reality is that there are problems in everything. Because, if you go through the regular public school thing, there's an enormous amount of time that's wasted. There's a lot of time where, they could be learning a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of wasted time. If you go through a lot of private schools, it's sometimes only mildly better, and you're putting a ton of money into it. If you are deciding to homeschool, then you're also first you have to put an insane amount of time into it, and also you are missing a lot of the social aspect, which is the cool part about schools, is getting to meet other kids, getting to relate to other people your age. So it's kind of one of those damn if you do, damn if you don't, because there's each one of them has some advantages, and each one of them has problems that go with it. I don't really see the perfect solution. I think to some degree, a lot of education is what happens outside of school. Is how you talk to your kids, how you read with them, how you reason with them. That's the stuff that's going to form them as human beings. But I hear you, because ideally they wouldn't have to waste so much damn time in school, where really what you learn that's useful is maybe at best 25% of the time you're there, which means that 75% of the time you're there. I mean, can you imagine what you could do with those hours of the day? Oh. How many things you can learn for real if it's something that you're passionate about, so you focus from the first to the last minute. I mean, you could do amazing things. Oh. I was thinking earlier today, I was thinking about, as I was wondering about when my daughter is going to start some serious math. As long as she's going to add and subtract, I can still help. But I was thinking, how many hours of math have I done in my life? What do I remember now? I can, again, do add and subtract kind of thing quickly in my head, maybe a little statistics, because I watch sports, and so I keep track of statistics and percentages and so on. That was maybe 2 years of my entire schooling in math. What about everything else that happened after that point? It's like, okay, maybe slightly more, 3 years. How many hours? What could I have done with those hours of my life?
Oh, I wish I wish they would have taught me. I wish they'd have had me in piano lessons, guitar lessons.
Yep.
How to rebuild cars, like all kind of stuff. You could have, like, useful things that you could use,
Exactly.
So yeah.
And those are skills that when you have them, you refresh them a little later, and quickly you remember it all, and if you're passionate about it, you'll get it quick. Most of the stuff I've done, I have no memory whatsoever. It's like it was time that was taken, put in the toilet, flushed, because there's nothing remain whatsoever in me, my memory, my personality, other than just being really, really bored.
It's right. You're right. And it's not like I would say it's not against it's not the teacher's fault. It's above them. It's like any job, really. It's the people above them that are collecting the huge paychecks that are the ones that are really screwing it for everybody. And I'm sure the system's been running for so long now, it's hard for anybody it's so overwhelming for them to think they can change it. But like my oldest brother, I have two older brothers. My oldest is an electrician, and that guy can build anything. He can wire anything. He can do anything with his hands in the world. Mm. And I can't do any of that. I wish I could, but he was born somehow with either the passion for it and the genetic code to do it or whatever, and I wasn't. But man, I wish I could do that, because I feel like an idiot. On Christmas Eve, I'm trying to put together my daughter's little playhouse things, and it's taking me like 2 hours. And I'm just losing my mind, So I don't have any of those useful skills that I need, and I wish at some point someone would have pushed those on me.
Man, there's so much, and even you think about some of the basics of life, the food we eat, in college they'll teach you a nutrition class, which is great, but a lot of it is chemistry and stuff that to me, if one was to teach about nutrition, great, you learn about what foods are good and what not, but that should go hand in hand with cooking, in actually learning how to make it and put it on the table. It should go hand in hand with growing your veggies, knowing how to grow stuff, when to grow it, in which way. So it kind of like the whole experience of going from seed to growing that stuff, to learning how to cook it, to know what goes with what. That's a holistic approach that actually makes sense to life. Studying from a purely theoretical standpoint, nutrition in a more abstract fashion, is interesting, it's helpful, but not nearly as much as if you bring it with the actual food on the table. That's a whole different experience.
Yeah, maybe through, I don't know, there's all these, like Khan Academy. I've looked up now when I try to rack my brain for just basic math problems I need to figure out, I'll go onto Khan Academy and watch the little videos. And you think that's part of the future? I know I've watched some things on pros and cons of like the online stuff, but do you think that's somewhere where we might be moving towards like a hybrid of that?
Probably, because I mean, the current system is obviously, nobody would argue that it's working great. It just isn't. But you will never get anybody with the vision to change it in a good way from within the institution. Big changes, revolutionary changes never take place starting from within an institution. They always take place from somebody who's considered weird and crazy, who's working outside of the institution, and somehow they will create a new paradigm that catch on and people will go for it. But, definitely schools are not going to change themselves. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen like that somebody creates something new, whether it's an online thing, whether it's a different kind of schooling, people will flock to it, and then eventually institution will slowly trail behind it after everyone else has caught on. That's probably how it's going to be.
Yeah, after the sad thing is that guy, that crazy weird guy that starts the revolution, it's going to happen long after he's dead probably. He won't even get to see it. Hopefully his kids maybe will see it.
That's how it always works, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. That's damn. It's sad. We'll see. Well, I don't know. Maybe everything's progressing pretty quickly now in this this crazy technological age.
Yeah, things are changing much faster than in the past. So maybe catch us within a personal lifetime where you can actually see that change happening at a faster rate.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I don't. Who knows? I'm not. I can't change it. I don't. Like I said, I don't have any answers. But so the thing, one of your supposed titles would be philosopher. For a layman like me, what would you? I'm sure you don't sit there and tell people. I don't know. Maybe do introduce yourself. I'm Daniele. I'm a philosopher.
Yeah.
What would that mean? How would you describe philosopher if an alien came down right here and asked you?
To me, I have a very barbarian approach to philosophy. To me, my approach to anything, actually, philosophy or religion or politics or the movies I watch, or to me, everything I'm interested in, at the end of the day, I'm only interested as long as it elevates the quality of my life. I'm interested in, so if we're talking philosophy, I'm only interested in those ideas that can help me improve my life in whatever way that may be. In some ideas is just because they sound cool and they make me happy to read them, but they have no practical application. Others because they help me be a better father or better in communicating with other people, or that's what interests me. To me, philosophy, I don't dig philosophy as an abstract field, separate from life. I'm interested in things as long as they affect life in a positive manner. So there are a ton of philosophy books or even famous thinkers that I'll start reading them and I'll fall asleep within 3 seconds because I'm like, this is so separate from day-to-day life. It has so little application. It's such a weird, perverted intellectual game with no real guts there behind it. There's no heart. I'm not interested. I don't care to read it. Other times, I'm like, wow, this idea, I can see how I can go from reading this on a piece of paper and be able to apply it where I will make me more effective communicating with people I care about, where I can get points across and I can understand them better. That's the kind of stuff that interests me, It has to work in life.
It's something that you can relate to, and I like how it has to be able to positively affect you. Do you have any examples of one guy, one philosopher, or one idea?
For example, I dig reading Taoism, right? I like Taoist thinking a lot. But if it was just about, this weird Asian philosophy, that whatever, who cares? I'm not doing it for throwing an exotic thing out there and say, I'm doing it because some Taoist ideas to me are about how life works. And they show me, like, for example, one Taoist thing that's typical is about flexibility. It's about never getting stuck in a single ideology where you believe that all the answers can be set up in a simple recipe. And as long as you stick to that recipe, then you're going to do well. Taoism is all about life is in a constant state of change. So you cannot fight today's battle with yesterday's tactics. You need to, maybe yesterday tactics were good and maybe they still work, but you have to look at the situation right here, right now. Then and only then you can see if that's the appropriate response or not. And that I dig, because it's something that I see in my own life. If you raise kids, some people will try to educate one kid with lots of rules, telling them what to do, what not to do. And for that kid, that may be the right approach because they respond well to structure and they kind of get lost if you give them too much freedom. But if you try to do the same thing with the other kid, they'll just get pissed off and they hate your guts. And you need to recognize that that's not the same method that worked for kid A does not work for kid B. Maybe kid B responds better to reasoning with them and talking to them and explaining why things are in a certain way. And then they'll get it and they'll listen to you. You know? So that's like that Taoist thing of not being stuck with one model only, but constantly adapt whatever it is that you think you know to the present situation to see if it actually works or doesn't. And, you know, that's in some ways, such a simple concept, and yet so many people don't use it, and they still kind of go by the rule book of how it's supposed to be. And life is never how it's supposed to be. It's what it is always different from how it's supposed to be in theory. And so I dig this emphasis on awareness over following the rules.
I like it, and you're not in it. The good thing that I think, like you said, you're not doing that just to sound cool or throw something exotic out there. I like when earlier you said how you will read some philosophers and you'll be asleep in 3 minutes. And that made me feel better because every once in a while when I was in college and even more now, I'll be like, all right, let me hear what these people are. Everyone's talking about these guys. Someone told me this is a great book, or this guy has all the answers and it's so cool. And I'll read it and I'll sit there. When I was a little bit younger, I would try to like power through it. I'm like, all right, let me see what I'm going to get from this. And now I almost know from the first page I read. I'm like, no, this is not speaking to me. So to hear it from a smart guy like you makes me feel better about it, because I think it's you got to find what works for you and what speaks to you really, because that's how school was for me, at least. Everybody learns in a different way, different manner, and I don't learn well sitting in a chair with a teacher up front at a lectern telling me everything we're doing, and especially if they sit there and they tell me all my homework assignments I'm going to have to do and how many papers I'm going to have to write. I feel like I'm drowning already on day one. So, but I've learned more since I got out of college. I've been out a while now. I've been out almost 9 years, but I've learned more since then than I did through the whole first 21 years, 18 years of schooling, whatever it was I was in, because I just think I'm more directed, I'm more, it's like, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I care about, I'm going to dive into that. And it's easy when you care about it,
Isn't that a concept? If people enjoy what they do, they actually do a good job and they learn. What a strange revolutionary idea. But you're right, for the academic institution, nobody gets it. And what you're saying is the absolute truth, it seems so simple, except that nobody does it. So it's not that simple. But
it's like everything. I say things are. It's simple, but it's not easy. And a lot of things are like that. Like it makes sense. Like, hey, if everyone would let's just be nice to everyone. I tell my daughter, I say, what's your ethos? And she'll say, be nice to everybody. And then 3 seconds later, she might tell me that she's gonna stab me. Like if we take her sucker away or something, and then 2 seconds later, she's hugging me and telling me I'm the best dad in the world. So it's like. It's very simple. Yeah, you should be nice to everybody, but it's not. It's easier said than done. So we're all in a constant state of working. But you see you learn anything over in Italy and all your world travels that would make us get on that track faster, or maybe stay with it longer, instead of jumping to conclusions right away and say, oh, this guy douchebag, don't like him instant, and can we take a step back? How do we do that, Daniele? I know you're a progressive dude.
The main thing for me is I think it's useful to be able to put yourself in anybody's shoes, even in the shoes of the people you hate. And that even after you'll do that job, you'll still hate them. You know what I mean? There's the dude who is like, there's no way in the world I can possibly like this person. Yeah. This is just a mean, horrible. I'm talking about like crazy cases. I'm talking serial killer. I'm talking, people that there's no possible way where they will relate in a good way. But I'm like, still, be able to see the world through the person's eyes does not mean that then you'll justify them. But it means that you'll understand what makes them tick, what makes them act the way they do. And again, understanding is a whole different game from justifying. But when you understand, then it becomes a lot easier to see maybe even somebody with the worst ideas in the world, who's a really bad human being, I'm sure there are 4 or 5 things that if you look at them, maybe their conclusions are not right, but the starting point, there's something legitimate. There's a feeling there that's like, well, of course, the guy wants to be loved, or the guy wants something where you can relate. Then you see the steps they have taken, and you're like, oh, God, that's like the most horrible thing in the world. But if you find that even tiny thing through which you can relate to human beings, it becomes so much easier to talk to somebody. And again, talk to somebody does not mean they'll have to become your best friend, or you have to suddenly sweep under the rug all the horrible things they do or say. But it means that now you have a way to try to have a communication that is not instant conflict, where you can try to, see if there's a little room for understanding each other. Again, maybe it's not like I had one time when I went back to Italy a few years ago, I was teaching a martial arts seminar, and one guy who came to attend the seminar was just a full-on neo-Nazi. And I was like, whoa, whoosh, that's a little heavy.
Yeah.
It's like, and talking with the guy in a context that it was not about politics, it was not about, his ideas about race or stuff like that, I could find ways where for those 5 minutes we could totally get along. Now, clearly I'm not going to get along when some other big priorities come into play, but I'm like, okay, now I have something to work with. If I can understand and relate to this guy, and even we can like each other for those 5 minutes, what can I do to maybe plant the seeds of some doubts regarding some of the ideas in entertaining that lead to some negative results? And that's what interests me. That ability, having empathy, does not mean that you have to forgive everybody or justify everybody. It means that you can feel what they feel. You are able to put yourself in their shoes, which even if you were to keep a bad, you're going to be in a conflictual relation. Even if you want to see the other person as the enemy, the first rule of warfare is to know your enemies, to understand how the other side think, because that will allow you to, in a way, even predict what they are about to do. If you remove the more manipulative aspect from this in a conflictual relationship and you try to see it as a learning about this other person, how can that help me navigate the situation in a way that we can both walk away gaining something rather than killing each other? That's the number one skill. So to me, empathy is number 1, number 2, number 3 is like the most important thing that one can have.
I'm sure it's pretty earth-shattering for some people to hear, but I mean it makes total sense. Like everything, say the truth makes sense. It just like, and what's so weird, man, how everything I've talked about this to some other guests I've had, how everything's like connected and it's so weird. I'm even talking to you. Like, I listen to Joe's podcast. I hear you. I hear Aubrey Marcus from On It on there. I've become friends with Aubrey. I know You've talked to Aubrey. You've been involved with him on it and everything. And then it's like, and now I'm talking to you. So first of all, that's just weird to me how all this is interconnected. I never would have thought I'd be talking to you, and it's awesome. It's really cool, and it's like it's one of my things that I always tell. I don't tell anybody. I don't ever give unsolicited advice. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is unsolicited advice. Like, I don't need someone to come up to me, hey, what you need to be doing, son, and they want to speak down to you. You need to be a better person. You need to treat your family like. Hey, first of all, you don't know me. But you know nothing. But so I'll never give advice to anybody unless they strictly ask for something, and I'll be like, hey, I don't have any answers, but I can tell you what's worked for me in the past and how I've messed up. But empathy seems to always come around. Like I've been seeing things on empathy a lot recently. It seems like, and without it being, I like how you said it's 1, 2, and 3. If you can put yourself in their shoes and having any kind of relationship, I think that with anyone close to you, and like I've been married for almost 9 years now, and we talk about it all the time. People say when they were first married, like, oh, we were in that old honeymoon phase the first couple of years, and things were great and everything, and then just kind of the passion died or whatever, and we didn't communicate. And I tell people, I'm like, I'm so happy I was the opposite of that. Our first couple of years, we were idiots, and we didn't know how to communicate. Right. We didn't do anything stupid to couldn't get over. We just got in dumb arguments, and we talk about it all the time. Like man, look how we were so young and just stupid and didn't know how to even talk to each other. And it's like now, every day gets better because we know who each other, we know ourselves, then we know how we live together. And then I feel like myself, I have some empathy for different ways that my wife thinks, even on situations. Like I've tried to put myself in her shoes, and then I get so proud of myself afterwards. Like, man, we just had an adult conversation there, didn't we? And so I'll be like, and even there's been times when I'll say, well, I completely disagree with what you're saying or what you're thinking, but I definitely understand how you see it that way. Like say anything. I can't think of one example, but it'll be something where in her mind she's saying that someone might look at this situation from the outside like, oh, they're looking at it however, and so I'll say, no, you're wrong. People aren't looking at it like that. You're not. No one's. Don't be worried about that. But I do understand what made you think that way. And after we had a conversation like that a year or two ago when I was like, I want to know how do you see this or why do you feel that way? And she told me, I'm like, oh my God, it was like a light came on for me. I was like, if I could do this with everybody, this would be awesome. So yeah, I'm always trying to, and obviously it doesn't always work, but that empathy thing is nuts, man. Like it takes some effort though. You have to try, you have to want to try. I think that's the biggest thing.
But in some way, it really boils down to just being aware and paying attention and not be constantly rushing to fill in the silence with what you want to put out there, but to also just look at reality for what it is and just not project, not judge like good, bad, just let's look at what it is, period, and feel it. Because then, so many, like you bring up the whole husband and wife kind of thing, in good relationship, in relationship with people you love. So many times we get bogged down into these stupid arguments that go on forever and ruin something good. And when you think about it, so many of them are avoidable. They are...
And you forget about what you started arguing about.
Yeah, it becomes an ego thing. It's like, you are not hearing me, and you are being an ass, and you're just kind of being hurtful. And if you just stop to pay attention where they are coming from, like you say, you don't have to agree with what they are saying. But understanding that emotion, understanding what's prompting them to go there, that alone does wonders for communication. Because, if somebody's telling me, you're wrong, screw you, well, they may even be right. But if they say it to me in that fashion, my first reaction is going to be, guard is coming up, and he's like, no, screw you, I'm right.
Even if you are wrong, even if you know you're wrong, you're going to fight for it. You have
Absolutely.
to.
It becomes a yelling match, and it's become an ego thing. If somebody tell me, look, I don't see it. I see what you feel. Help me see it the way you do. And then maybe I explain it. And then they're like, I kind of see, but I think here, in this one spot, maybe you're making a leap that's really not there. Let's talk about it. Let's consider it. Well, now I don't feel like I'm being attacked. I feel like somebody's trying to work with me to come up to whatever is the best possible scenario that will make both of us walk away happy. Then it's not the enemy anymore. I don't need to bring my guard up. Is somebody who has basically constructive criticism, or maybe it's not even criticism at all. They're trying to understand where I'm coming from a different place. So suddenly that discussion is we're working together to figure out why we are doing certain things or why we come to some conclusions. It becomes so much easier to listen to each other and actually hear each other with that premise. Then when it turns into an ego thing, all listening goes out the window and it becomes, I'm right, no, I'm right. And I don't think there's ever been a single time in history when a good outcome ever came out of those discussions.
No, and I see those, I watch that happen every day, it seems like. And I'm just happy that for whatever reason, I feel like I don't need to like win arguments, or I don't need to be the victor. And people, the old line, gosh, just another annoying thing that parents will say, like, man, he argues so much, he should have been a lawyer. I hear that all the time. Like, no, yeah, oh, snap, yep. This kid's a dick, he should be a lawyer. Is that what that means? Like, I hear that all the time. I still hear it from people like 30-year-old kids, their mom be like, oh, I told you should probably go to law school now. And so, but it's like, everyone wants to win. I talked to this guy named Adam Grant, wrote a great book called Give and Take on how we don't need to be the old model of the CEO that steps on everybody to get to the top. He shows a bunch of studies that you don't need to be that guy anymore. The more you give, the better you can grow. And someone else's success doesn't take away from yours, which is another simple thing, but it's very hard to live that. But what I would say is like, I don't know why it seems like we want to win arguments. Is that just straight ego for us as humans and males, especially, that no matter, I watch it happen every day to where guys will go out and like, AJ, what do you think about this? I'm like, I could care less, man. I'm going to blow my head off if I have to get in that conversation right now, because both, now we're going to have three guys going to argue the point, and you're all wrong and we're all wrong. So no, like, what, have you found what that is? Do we know why that is? Even, I mean, females too, I think, do it.
Yeah, I think it really boils down to ego, and everybody has ego, and it's okay. And as long as it's kind of like a garden, you take out the weeds and you cultivate it. There's a place for ego where it can be a good thing, but if you let it get out of control, it's bad news. Because I mean, I don't really care about kind of like what you're saying. I don't care to win any argument. I don't care to argue. I care about being happy. If I lose every argument I ever get into, but I'm happy, well, that's a win in my book. The win-lose thing, it does not increase my level of happiness, so who the hell cares? And the only goal is increase the level of happiness for myself and people around me. So whatever helps me get there, I like. Whatever doesn't get me there, it's a waste of time.
That's good. It's awesome, man. It's true. We don't need to waste our time on things that don't matter and we're not passionate about. And that's one thing that I've found as I've gotten older, that I'm happy that I'm figuring out that I don't have to waste my time on things. Like I said earlier, I was trying to, when you're younger and you're trying to read something that some stupid hipster kid with cuff jeans is trying to tell me that, oh, I'm just really into this. Oh, he's smoking a clove cigarette telling me I'm just really into this, whatever. I can't even come up with any names. But so I'm like, oh, maybe I'll check this guy out. I don't know. And you check it out, and you just, like I said, you're powering through. Now, I would never think about doing that now. And I'm not saying that I've conquered anything or don't have an ego or I'm anything, but I know what I'm passionate about, I guess I would say. And I can tell instantly too. And I think that's, as you get old, maybe that's just something that comes with experience. You have to figure out what you're not passionate about. Just like I tell my wife, she had to go out with all these turds until she found me, Like, girls, you got to know what a turd tastes like to figure out what the roses smell like, Which I'm no rose, but I got her, I tricked her, I duped her. I didn't really have a point there, but what I like what you're saying, man. Like, if we have a really good coach here who I've become close with, and he always is talking about affecting do you affect the people around you in a positive way, and do you make other people feel good without even having to try? And that's one of the things that I've noticed, and I'll try to even have to check myself at times if something's not going my way or whatever, and I feel like I need to, if I'm being negative or I think someone is wronging me or things aren't going my way, it's not going to help me, first off. Definitely not going to help me personally to sit here and pout and be negative or try to be an idiot, and B, it's definitely not going to help my teammates and the guys around me. So why even waste our time? It's like that, I don't know if it's not fight or flight, whatever it is what is that in our brains? Is that our old school Neanderthal in us that we just want to be an idiot when we feel like things aren't going our way and we want to pout? Yeah,
it's like, I'm hurt, so everybody in the world should pay attention to the fact that I'm hurt. I mean, in a way, it's just very, it's like a kid, right? When you're a kid and something makes you mad, if you show that it made you mad, hopefully your parents pay attention. And so many people carry it into adulthood, imagining that if they show how hurt they are or how they feel like a victim or how, then the universe will somehow take care of them. And sorry to inform you, the universe doesn't give a crap, and just the universe is not interested about the petty dramas that we go through. So it's like, take responsibility. And it does not mean it's your fault, something that happened, but it means, okay, it happened, now what? What do you do with it? And sitting and pouting, if sitting and pouting deliver a result, I would be all for it, but it doesn't. So then what are we doing?
True, yeah, you want to get out there and do it. And that's what I thought. It seems like how you, from watching and reading your stuff from afar, it's like that's what you do. Like whatever your passion, whatever hits your brain and you feel like could be fun, and now from talking to you, it could positively influence you or impact you or the people around you. It seems like you kind of dive into it. Has that kind of been your motto your whole life, or did you find that as you got older?
that's the game. To me, it's like I remember exactly when I was really bored in school, and I'm like, why am I doing this again? I would sort of drift off, and I would, as an exercise, I would just start writing down like pages and pages of what makes me happy. If I never had to worry about money, if I never had to worry about what I'm supposed to do, how would I feel my days? You know, would I just be bored if I wasn't doing some boring schoolwork, or what would I do? And I think it's the healthiest exercise that one can do is to figure out what makes them happy. Because once you figure that out, then you can start seeing patterns of how you can structure your life so that more time is dedicated to those things. And whether it's because you figure out a career that encompasses some of those things that make you happy, whether because you figure out, you know, it becomes how you structure your life. And I think it's a crime, the fact that we don't encourage people to think about stuff like this. That you can go through your entire schooling experience and nobody ever asks you to really think deeply for a few weeks about what is that. If you could design your life from A to Z, how would you feel it? What would you do with it? Most people are clueless. Like if they are to list the things that make them happy, they get 2-3 things and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, if you don't know, who's supposed to know? You know, it's like, and the problem is, I remember that because there was this one time I was finishing college and I was talking with this woman and I got a really bad vibe from her, but she was ridiculously hot. So I was like, no, she's a really sweet woman. Let me get to know her more and stuff. And I kind of wanted to get a feel for what she was all about. And at one point she said, yeah, I don't have time to figure out what makes me happy. I just want to start making money. And I thought, how sad, man. It's like, you're what, 22, 23, and you don't have time to figure out what makes you happy? When exactly are you going to have time? When you start working 40, 50, 60 hours a week for 50 weeks a year, and then, you know, by the time you're done, you retire at 65, and eventually you die, and you have lived somebody else's life. You know, your whole life has been essentially a waste of time and energy because there was never any you there. There was never any you making choices. It was just you going through the motion of somebody else's priorities. That, to me, is the ultimate sadness. That's the ultimate waste.
I think a lot of people get stuck in that for sure, just because they'll say, oh, it's easy for us to sit here and talk about, but I have responsibilities, I have kids, I have bills, I have mortgage. But and I hear that. But at the same time, like you said, what's your goal? You're gonna work. You're gonna keep trying to climb the ladder. Great. So from your parents and your friends, it looks like everything's going well, and you go and sit in your living room and cry at night and wonder like why you don't have any personal connections. But I think you're a guy that shows that. So I mean, like you said, you have a daughter. What is she, 6?
5.
5. Yeah. You have a 5-year-old, and you're out here doing everything, doing all kind of stuff with one of the greatest responsibilities ever. And I, as a father of a daughter, I am with you that I can't say every, nothing's black and white, Daniele, but most girls that seem to struggle in adult life, whatever they may do, that anyone looks down upon, that they all have daddy issues, I feel like. Yep. And so I feel a huge responsibility in that. My daughter's 4, and I can see it already, like, man, it's the greatest thing ever to try to put those, you get great things, you know, and try to show her how it feels good to make everyone else feel good and treat your friends. Yep. But it's like when girls have dad issues, they seem to make poor decisions throughout their whole life. And then it's like if you ask them, it's like 90% of them will be like, yeah, well, my dad either never talked to me, or never in the picture, or he was there every day, but it was like he never even asked me once, how do you feel? Or he never told me he loves me. It's like the old thing, the old school model of the husband, they'll ask the husband will die, you know, husband dies from liver damage at age 62, you know, and the wife is at his funeral, and they say, well, hey, he was such a great husband and father, which he really wasn't, you know. It's like the old TV shows. And they say, he never had to tell me he loved me, but because he said he didn't have to tell me because he knew I loved him. I'm like, no, he didn't. What do you mean? You need to tell him. You need to tell your kids you love them, you know. They need to know that. They need to hear that or give them issues. So I think you're an example of a guy that lives it because you're raising your daughter on your own as well, right?
Yeah. So it's intense, man. Some days let's put it that way. It's definitely a challenge. There are a bunch of moments where I'm very much aware of my limitations and all my screw ups, because with kids it's pretty obvious. They are so innocent. They don't have all the crap that adults have. They respond because they feel something. There's no act there. And so there are plenty of times when I see like, oh man, I really played my cards wrong this time, or what the hell, why did I get so mad over something so little? It's my own stupid frustration that I'm dumping on this poor kid. What am I doing? Because she spilled the milk on the floor? Come on, man, get over yourself. And so it's not like he's, I'm the greatest father ever and I'm doing everything right, because I see a lot of things that I'm doing where I'm like, man. But then at the same time, the one thing that I feel really good about is pretty much exactly what you were saying a minute ago, which is really she knows she's loved, that there's never a question in her mind that she's loved like crazy. So I can have my own screw-ups due to my own limitations, for sure, every day. But as far as some of those core things, the feeling that you are absolutely loved, that you have somebody who loves you, but this does not mean that they will let you slide with everything. That, sometimes there will be the point where you can have constructive criticism, which does not mean you stop loving them, and you constantly reassure them of that. But at the same time, it puts you in a place where you can show, hey, maybe we can do this better. Maybe if you went this route, it would be actually better for you. Maybe, you gain credibility because you give them the one thing they need, which is a mountain of love. And then everything else you have to add to that, one is more likely to listen to you if you are providing that thing that they need. And so that's where I feel good, is that I know that she's super loved, and I see her that she's really happy about a lot of things, so I feel good about that. Then there are a bunch of little daily things where I recognize, I let stress get to me way more than I should, and there are all those things where I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of room for improvement there.
I saw you recently go on Joe Rogan's podcast, and you had her. I know you got a lot of. I think you got a lot of positive feedback from it. But I usually just listen to the audio version of his. But I was listening to the audio, and then I hear Joe saying, well, "I think this is the first we have Daniele's daughter is in studio, and she sat in your lap for like the whole 2 hours. I think over 2 hours, and it was awesome, man. It was cool to see, just because." That's not an atmosphere where you see a lot of kids, right. And you were in there, and it didn't matter. You didn't skip a beat. Whatever you were talking about, you could tell she was really comforted, and she felt good about it. And it was like, what a cool experience for her, though, when right now it's probably hard to see, but when she looks at some, like it's the internet, things are out there, right. They don't go away. So at some point in her life, though, she'll be like, man, I mean, she's going to say that about you anyway. Like, man, my dad was a unique, cool dude. But she's going to be 20 years old someday. And she's like, wow, what was my dad? That was awesome. My dad took me, I was sitting on his lap as he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, one of the biggest podcasts there is, and just how you handled it. I think, I think I watched the whole thing, and you could see where I saw times almost where I was like, man, I would have started to get like frustrated, or like impatient, like that's the hardest thing I think as a parent, is getting impatient when your kids want to stay up later. Oh no, just read one more book. They're master manipulators. And so your daughter wasn't acting up or anything, but I could see, like, if I'm trying to talk and they want to grab your ear, want to say, Dad, my daughter does that. Dad, here, let me talk. Dad, let me say something. I'm like, oh man. And you didn't have any of that. Did you going in, were you worried about that at all? Did you have any kind of like anxiety about it?
I was hoping, because I was supposed to have some babysitting plans set up. They fell through at the last minute.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I didn't want to flake on Joe. I was like, I can't call at the last minute and say I can't. So in my optimistic self, I figured that we would go there and she would sit in a corner watching a movie with the earphones, and everything would work out fine. And I was like, and normally would work. At home, she'll sit there and watch a movie on her own, and she's fine. And of course, when she was there, she's like, nope, I'm sitting in your lap. And I'm like, okay, sit in my lap. But no, she's not just sitting in your lap. She's sitting in my lap and squirming like a monkey, climbing all over. She never got loud, which is good, because that way we could have a conversation. But it was definitely a challenging conversation, let's put it that way. So, I'm glad it worked out. I was kind of feeling bad for Joe, because I'm used to my own daughter. But of course, for him, it's a distraction, obviously, when you see this crazy monkey climbing all over the other person they are trying to have a conversation with. So I felt bad about that, but I was like, hey, there's really nothing I can do about it right now. So it's like, let's make the best of it and roll with it. And then I do think what you're saying, that, down the road for her, it actually may be fun to look back and see that as something that happened back when she was 5 years old. And, so I figure, let's roll with it. It's, let's.
Yeah, she's gonna she'll be talking to her friends. What did your dad do? Take you over to the bank, while you were filling out paperwork? My dad had me so that's all, sitting on the werewolf in the lobby or whatever. I've never even been there, but I've only seen pictures of. So I understand why she wanted to sit in your lap, Daniele. That'd be tough to sit in the corner when you got stuffed werewolves and stuff.
Joe's studio is interesting. There are statues of aliens, werewolves, all sort of stuff. But on the other hand, she was feeling home because behind him, Joe has this big poster of Jimi Hendrix, and my daughter is a huge Hendrix fan. She is like, that's Jimi Hendrix. The guy, JB, the guy who works with Joe there to take care of all the technical stuff, he was like, she recognized Hendrix? I'm like, of course. She loved Jimi Hendrix. That was a trip in itself. A few days ago, I had to explain what a drug overdose is. I tell you how fun that was, because it's like, of course, she want to know, right? She liked the guy's music. She want to know. And so I was like, okay, how do I explain that? It was like, when you really like candies a lot, but they are not good for you, and you take too many, and then you feel sick. Well, take that 100 times that, and you kind of start getting an idea. She was like, oh, okay, I get it. Makes sense, So
that's a good, simple explanation. Yeah, kids definitely want to know why.
Oh yeah.
Why things are. So I'm always coming up with crazy explanations for things. That's funny. Yeah, another way this everything is crazy connected. My 2-year-old son's name is Hendrix.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, man.
That's funny.
Yeah, how about that? How weird is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and my daughter recognizes.
This is all, there's some alien playing our, pulling the strings for us and just having fun, throwing hints in there. You guys haven't noticed that you're in the Matrix?
Yeah, there's a glitch in the Matrix tonight.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't even know where to go from that one. But either way, I want to give you huge props for that. You were great. I think it could work as like an example to people that want to say, oh, I can't do that. I can't strike out on my own and do something. I got responsibilities. I got kids. I'm like, bro, watch this video. You want to see? I mean, I know that's one tiny glimpse into your life, but. Sure. You're still doing it. You're still like a renaissance man of all the stuff that you want to do with you're not some 23-year-old, right, single dude with no responsibilities and just have to pay your rent barely. You have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of people counting on you. So I think that you serve as like a inspiration to people like that want to use that excuse, I think. So
I think there's something there. I mean, obviously, taking somebody who's responsible and is taking care of business, that's something that I respect. So I understand when people say, oh, I have a responsibility. That's all. I get it. It's a priority, and I do get it. But at the same time, you being unhappy, you going through your life feeling frustrated and miserable, that's not exactly setting a good example for your kids. Yeah, you may be providing, they have a roof over their head, they have food on the table, that's very important. But at the same time, if the model you're putting in front of them is somebody who just goes through the motion, is on the receiving end of just a crappy life and just doesn't do much to change it or find a way to be happy, you're doing them a favor only part of the way. You're taking care of some essential basics that any parent should take care of, but you're also using I have responsibility as an excuse not to do the other part of the job, which is show them how to be happy in a way. Show them how to find at least ways. Doesn't mean nobody's happy all the time, but finding ways to take charge of your own life. There's something that actually our common friend Aubrey Marcos told me. We were talking about relationships, and this was a while back, and I was telling him I was a little hesitant in terms of having any, kind of getting into a relationship with Isabella around, and I felt that my daughter, what if the relationship doesn't work, and all of that. So there's kind of that idea of you want to keep your kids away from any possible relationships. Is obviously they're going to develop attachments, and then you have to yank these people from their life if things don't go well. And so I had all these I felt like these very mature, responsible reasons why you need to keep it at bay. And one thing that Aubrey said that I thought was brilliant was, you're not screwing up kids just by showing them things that don't work. You're also screwing them up kids if you don't show a model of a relationship that works well. So go for it, man. It's like, do what you need to do and do the best you can to have a good relationship and hopefully last and become a great model. And if it doesn't, find in a graceful, good way to end it in a way that you would want your kids to see that and learn something from, rather than be traumatized. And I was like, man, there's something there to be said. I had absolutely no comeback because he was right and he just did me a favor. This is one of those cases where losing the argument, you win. Mm-hmm. Because he was right. There was no, he was 100% right, and I realized that I wasn't. And so I was like, okay, this actually helps me. This gives me something to think about, where I was thinking I was doing her a favor, and I realized maybe not as much as I thought. And I thought, okay, now I learned something. This was a good one.
That's pretty deep stuff by Aubrey, but I expect that. He's been in the jungles of Peru and doing ayahuasca for every 4 months. So yeah, I love it, man. I love how, like I said, I've developed a diverse group of friends and people that I talk to. So it's fun to see people doing things that I was never even aware of before, the last 3, 4, 5 years of my life. But it made me think of when you were saying that about like keep trying to shelter your kids or show them, you're giving them shelter and everything. Yeah, they definitely need to be safe. But it's like kids notice everything. Like my daughter will say something. My son, he speaks a little bit, not as much as, not like a 4-year-old, obviously, but he's only 2. But she'll say something, she'll reference something that I said like a month and a half ago. That I'm like, come on, man, there's no way. How? And it's true, it happens all the time. So they notice. So it's like the group, the parents that we all know that stayed like, well, we're just gonna stay married until they get to college, and then we'll get divorced. And they're like, I've heard people say this when their kids are like 9. And I was like, let me just knock out a quick more 9 years of being miserable, and my kids won't notice. They'll have no idea, and they'll break up for their sake when they go to college.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
You talk to those kids, and they know. They're like, oh my gosh, I would tell my parents now, just separate now, please. Exactly. You guys will be happier. Yeah.
It's amazing how there are a bunch of cases where kids are so much more mature than parents in that regard, and they're like, come on, man, this is obviously not working. What are you doing? And that's the fact.
It is, and I think your kids also need to see, it's basically what Aubrey said, they need to see the model, they need to see how they should be treated by, like, especially a girl. I keep coming back to the whole girl thing because obviously I have the responsibility of bringing a girl up. Girls need to see the model of how they should be treated by guys, I think, and that's why I try to go on. I've stolen these from other people. They've brought them to my attention, like dress up and take my daughter out for a date, at restaurants. We do that, try to do that a couple times a month at least, and it's so special to them. And open the door for them, do things for them, open the doors, be polite, and show them how a guy should treat them. So then, at some point in their subconscious, when they're older, they know, like, instead of these little punk kids that want to take them out, take them to prom. Right. They need to find a way to sift through those guys and find the good ones, the few good ones that are out there.
Absolutely. No, and there's something there about, showing affection. So many people are not going to show affection to people they're in a relationship with. And it's nuts. It's like, why are you even in a relationship if you don't let them know that you love them, if you don't show them that you love them in a lot of ways? It doesn't mean you have to do crazy things. It can be very small gestures. It can be just stuff you say, but it feels good, right? I mean, hell, it feels good if somebody does it to you to let you know how much they care. Mm-hmm. Why don't you do it for them? And I think for kids to see that, there are a bunch of times when my daughter will see something like that, and when she sees it, she's like, oh, like she gets a big smile, like seeing somebody else being really kind to each other and showing love. And she's like, that's what I like, and recognizing it and seeing it in her eyes, I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. She's seeing it makes me happy, makes her happy. It's something that works.
What would you do? Let's say you have people have take your kid to work day. What would your day look like if you took your daughter to work with you?
There would be a lot of driving involved because Yeah, I teach. I live in one part of LA. I teach in two different universities in different parts of LA. So she would come with me, probably be in a class or two. Part of the thing with me is that, again, because I don't do just one thing, it's all over the place. So it may be go record a podcast somewhere, go teach a class at a university, come back home, and a lot of it is going to be at the computer, sending emails, talking to people, writing. So it's not the go to a place where you sit at a desk and there's a cubicle and that's the end of it. It's kind of all over the place. That's why it's funny. It's like in some way, work never ends, because it's not like there's a point of the day where suddenly it's not work day for me, because the part, my free time and my work are constantly mixing. It's like I'm checking something on the net, that's free time, I'm having fun. But somebody emailed me that I want to reply to, but I want to reply to, I'm happy to do it, but it's kind of work related. It's like, there really is no separation. Sometimes I think I need a little more separation, maybe just taking 3 hours a day to just say, screw it all. I don't want to think about anything that's even remotely work related. I just want to go work out, or I want to just stare at a wall or something. It's probably healthy to quiet down. But yeah, that's, my life is kind of all over in that regard.
Did you, when you came to the States, were you coming to LA the whole time? Did you know when you were in Italy, like, I want to go to LA? Did it attract you there somehow?
Yeah, I think LA, what intrigued me about it is that there's an element where so much of the world consumes what comes out of LA. If you just think about Hollywood movie to start with, if you think about so much of the music we listen to, everybody and their grandmother goes through LA. There's just such a movement of, it's one of the big globalized centers of the world. There are people from literally every country on earth are here in LA. So I dug that. I like the fact that there's an element when you're in LA where you feel you're in the center of the world. It does not mean it's a good center all the time. There's a lot of nasty, negative things. There's a lot of problems with living in LA. I don't idolize it at all. But I like this idea of this is the place where you can experience so many things. I mean, even something as basic as going out to eat. You can literally try probably every other cuisine in the world out here. In most other parts of even US, you can find some awesome food, but you're not going to be able to try all these different things from all these different countries. It's not set up that way. And so I really enjoy that about Los Angeles. I struggle with it a little because, it's such a big place. It's really not very well designed to build community. You run into people all the time. You meet a lot of great people, but you probably don't even have the time or the structure around it to build a deeper relationship. So I don't like that as much. But, everywhere you are, you pay a price, right? You're in the small town, you have closer community, but you see fewer people, you run into less stimuli. Big city, you get all the stimuli, you meet a lot of people, less debt, It's all advantages and disadvantages at the end. It's not there one place and it's all white or black. But
do people? So when you were growing up in Milan, did you how do people there look at the U.S.? Do they look at it as do the majority of the people there want to get to the U.S. and live like you have come over and done, or do they? Yeah, I don't know, see Hollywood on TV and everything and think, that's a fake plastic world. I don't want anything to do with that.
I think Europe has both things going on. There's an element that's clear sour grapes. There's an element of jealousy because the United States, in terms of the culture we consume, is producing way more than, it's like, how many Italian movies have I watched in my life? How many American-made movies I watched in my life? Come on, of course I watch 95% American-made stuff.
Yeah.
There's an element where you'll get a lot of Europeans who get these sour grapes about the Americans, they think they are all that, but a lot of it is just so silly because it's like, come on, man. It's like, yeah, there are some great things about living in Europe and there are some beautiful things. At the same time, don't be an idiot. There's a ton of amazing stuff that's coming from the United States, and if you fail to appreciate it out of what? Again, ego is because you are born in it. Suddenly you have to just put it down. It's ridiculous. So I've seen both in Europe. I've seen people who have this bad United States, don't like it, screwed up priorities, and many people are like, please get me there as fast as I can. And it's kind of funny when sometimes they are the same person. There's some schizophrenic thing going on there where it's like, oh, those damn Americans, except I really want to live there and I want to, it's like, it's kind of funny to watch.
Do you consider yourself, like, do you feel like you're an American now, or do you consider yourself an American?
I mean, to be honest, I never felt at home anywhere. Mm-hmm. I never felt at home in Italy. I never felt like, I actually probably appreciate Italy more now that I don't live there, because I take sometimes things that I took for granted back then. Now I realize that they were not so automatic. So I do see some of the good stuff more. I feel like I'm a weird alien or from outer space everywhere I am, where I kind of fit in some way and I really don't in others. I definitely feel, I mean, now I know that my life is in the US, that I'm going to be living here for the foreseeable future and probably my whole life, and I feel totally okay with it. I don't have this longing to, oh no, I belong somewhere else. So in that sense, yes, I feel I belong here in that regard. But at the same time, I don't have, I don't know, I guess identity for me, especially national identity, doesn't mean a ton. I feel I'm interested in weird, unique individuals. I'm not really interested in representatives of a particular culture. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my take.
How do you handle when you look around and see people, I see this a lot and I struggle with it at times, people that, it's like, I don't know how long this has been this way, but where it's cool, for some reason, it's cool to be different. It's cool for someone to go against the norm. You know, like, I break the rules. You know, I don't listen to them. I don't. You know, it's like I hate that guy, and sometimes I am that guy, but I try not to be. You know, so it's like this weird, like, hipster weird movement is the counterculture type thing that's going on. Has that grown since you got here when you were 19 years old? Because it seems, for me at least, I feel like maybe I'm just more aware now, but It's like it's everywhere. Like everywhere you look, like especially kids think it's like this. It's so cool to be different. I like how you are. You're your own guy. You're unique, but you also defend the conservative and the individuals that are doing the right thing and responsible. It's cool how you defend both sides equally, it seems like. But how has that movement affected what you believe or how you kind of live your life?
I think that both those identities, the establishment and the people who make a profession of rebelling against the establishment, I feel they are equally silly, because it's about holding on to this very rigid identity either way. Even the guy who his whole identity is built on being a rebel is like, you're really just only reacting to that other thing. You're not really creating your own path. You're just being the guy who's, whatever they say, I'll say the opposite. Yeah. It's still kind of teenage-like, still very rebelling against the rule. It's one thing if you're rebelling against the rule because they really don't belong to you, and it just, in this case, it's not that you want to make a show of breaking the rules, it's just that you don't fit in them and you think they're stupid rules. But I take it a lot more from some guy who then can also appreciate, I'll rebel against these rules and I'll completely stick to these other ones. These ones are good. Because then you're making choices on a case-by-case scenario and you're really looking at something for what it is. When somebody's always either following them or breaking them, I feel that there's something missing, because it's like, come on, man, really? You think that every single rule out there is good or every single rule out there is bad? Do you live in such a simple world? Is it really that black and white to you? So I think that's one of the problems that I have with clear-cut identities. If I'm hanging out with people who are very square and establishment-like, I will get bored rather quick. If I hang out with the people who are against the establishment all the time, I will get bored rather quick, because I feel that I'm dealing with living stereotypes. I'm not dealing with real flesh and blood human beings. I'm dealing with people who have that identity and that shapes their entire being. Interesting human beings are weirder than that. There's a lot more going on. That's and so that's where I feel that a lot of this is. I don't dig that level of simplistic identity.
And I think that interesting people don't have to tell you they're interesting either.
Exactly.
They just are. They don't have to tell you they're. If a dude is a so-called rebel or whatever, he's never called himself a rebel. That's the thing. Exactly. He doesn't have it tattooed on his chest.
That's exactly
against the grain or something stupid on his back. Like, all right, buddy. I think right there you just showed your true colors right there.
Precisely. That's the most square thing there is on the other side.
Yeah, it's like So the extremes, crazy extremes like that are scary to me, and it's good to be extremely passionate and whatever about things, I think. But yeah, like, man, I don't know, like I know this is just like I'm just sitting here agreeing with you and everything the whole time, but it's crazy because what you're saying a lot to me is it's so true, but it's so simple. Like, yeah, well, of course, it makes a lot of sense. It really does, and it's nothing is black and white. I don't think like that strictly where you strictly go against it. Well, this guy says blue, I'm saying green. Like, no matter what, really. Like, if we all took a little bit of time to step back and think, well, maybe how do I feel about this exact situation, this exact moment in time right now, things would be a lot different, I think. I think obviously the whole political parties get caught up in that, Republican, Democrat, liberal. Like, it's like, you agree with every single, I want to ask, like, that's another thing where I think as I get older, I just have no patience for, it's weird. It's a flaw I have, and I have no patience for people sitting there and telling me their stories and like, really, you telling me you like disagree, you don't agree with whatever this politician's doing and what he's saying? I was like, first off, man, I don't care what he's saying. If it doesn't affect me directly, I'm not that worried about it. And you don't even understand what you're saying. You're just regurgitating something. So it's like, I don't have that. I'm naturally actually a pretty passive dude, and I don't have that anymore where I can just be like, oh, okay, all right, yep, and just shake my head. I'm like, I got to go. I have to, like, leave the room now. Yeah. And people get mad, but it's like I just don't have the patience for whatever reason anymore, and I don't know. Because I'm on a path trying to figure everything else out, but I think all of us are. Is that what they would call in the radio world a perfect segue? Would that be why you call your podcast the Drunken Taoist?
Yeah, I mean, the Taoist thing is funny because to me Taoist it's not even an identity. Typically most identities are about, in order to be whatever, belong to a political ideology or religion or thing, you have to have certain level of faith in certain ideas and fit. To me, Taoism is just, it speaks the language of life. It's just telling you, this is how life works. You want to use it? Good for you. You don't want to use it? Who cares? Nobody's trying to convince you. So I'm not really that married to the term. I mean, I like it because if you got to call it something, so why not? But Taoism really is one of the things that I don't care to defend any kind of Taoist orthodox. I couldn't care less. It's about, these are ideas that make sense. If you show me a better alternative, I'll gladly take it the next second. I'll drop whatever. That's kind of my way about anything I say or believe. I'm not married to any of those ideas. I like those ideas because they seem to be working for me. But if 5 seconds from now you show me that one of those ideas doesn't work and that there's a better alternative, great. I don't feel I lost anything. I just gained something. Now I'm smarter than I was before and I can do something that makes my life better. It's kind of like the conversation with Aubrey. I thought I had a great answer and Aubrey comes back with one that's way better. And I'm like, why am I going to hold on to this answer that now I know was not the right one? Okay, drop. Bye. Made sense then. Doesn't make sense anymore. This is a much better alternative. I don't care those ideological debates. I'm completely uninterested to argue, whether one ideology is better than another is. Those ideas, do they help or not? And that's what I dig about the Taoist stuff, is that there's no effort to convince anybody. It's a bunch of people in the world who could pick up the Tao Te Ching and read it and realize that they are already doing a lot of those things. And they didn't have to, there are a bunch of people who apply Taoism all the time without knowing the first thing about it. That's what I like about it, that it speaks the language of life. It doesn't speak the language of an ideology that you have to apply rigidly to life. It is life. It is what it is. It's like, you could call it lifeism rather than Taoism, and it's the same thing. So that's what I enjoy. And the drunken part, I guess I enjoy the unorthodox, weird sort of enjoyable party atmosphere, I guess, attached to it.
Yeah, it adds. I mean, I think it shows a little personality of you. You know, you just why not want to have fun with it, and the name is fun. It grabs people's attention. That's for sure. Do you have anything that you? Do you have any like when you were saying that? I was just thinking. Do you have anything that you really would take to the grave that you would stand up for? That you would, you know, is that hard? Is that a hard thing to have like a fine line of? Because I agree with what you're saying. I understand. If you show me a better alternative, boom, I'll drop my old one. Is there any? Do you have anything that you would take with you? You know, it would never change that you could think of at the top of your head.
Well, as far as behavior goes, I really don't have a very complex morality. I have very few rules, but the ones I do, I take extremely seriously, and I never break them. So it really boiled down to three things for me in terms of behavior. You know, I never break my word. You know, if I give you my word, I will never break it for no reason, in no circumstance. So I'll think really long and hard before I give my word about something, because once I do it, there are no exceptions. You know, if I were to break my word, the next thing I have to do is shoot myself, because there's just no honor, no dignity once you do. So I take that super seriously. I try not to. Well, this one another one is not even I try. This is another one of those things where there are no exceptions. I never betray the trust of people who give me their trust. That to me is just unthinkable. You know, I could not live with myself if I were to betray the trust of people who open their heart to me. That's just not going to happen. Those are the sort of the hard rules. And then, as a general attempt, with some exception, is, if at all possible, I'll try to be kind to anybody. Of course, if you are coming at me with an axe, I'm not going to be kind. You know, I'm just going to figure out a way to drop you before you do that to me. So there are exceptions to that. But so again, the first two are very rigid. No exception exists. This sort of trying to be kind to everyone I can run into is a goal more than a rigid rule. But those are, to me, the basics. You know, these are the things that are the essence of my morality, my approach to life in that regard. And particularly the first two, I am as rigid as I can be about it. There are no exception to those things. You know, there is no. I hate when I see people who have a set of values, except that then they never live up to it. I'm like, well, why even have those values if they are not? If you really believe them, you would live up to it. The fact that you constantly, you know, you say one thing and you mean another, that means you don't really mean it deep down, you know, you don't. So just be honest with yourself, acknowledge that that's not who you are. And so, yeah, a lot of what I say may sound like, oh, there's a ton of flexibility in everything, and there is, except when there isn't. And giving your word or honoring the trust of people who give it to you, that to me is sacred. There are no exceptions ever, you know.
That's perfect though. With it's almost like ideologies or belief systems that you will say, I if you show me something better, of course I'll take it. But then those rigid rules that you're talking about, those aren't even. That's just what you live by. That's you. That's being authentic to yourself. I think so. That's not like saying I'm only going to vote for liberals, you know. And if you show me a better conservative, I'll do it. You know, you're talking about some real stuff that's been, you know, from the dawn of time. That some great things have happened for people when people have kept their word, and a lot of better things would happen now if everybody lived by that. And it's pretty cool that, like you said, those are your set in stone things that you kind of take to the death. But that's like your whole. I would guess some of that comes from just how you were born. You know, I'm sure you're like that from day one. You were brought up with that in your head, but also you've had a lifetime of martial arts and everything, to where it seems like that's a big part of it, is the honor and character. And is that how partly? Can you explain how you got in that Bruce Lee documentary, the I Am Bruce Lee? That was awesome, man. That was like the greatest. Wasn't it Spike TV's highest rated like documentary or show ever?
That's my friend Pete McCormack. He was the director of this thing, and he's a brilliant director, super nice guy. And that's how I met him, because I didn't know him before, and I met him when we recorded I Am Bruce Lee. Man, I had a blast, and I really dug Pete's style. I was very happy to get to meet him. Now we're trying to work on a few projects, see if they go anywhere. And but yeah, the Bruce Lee documentary, I had a blast. It was kind of funny because the genesis of the whole thing, at least the way I tell the story, I don't know if it's the truth or not, because it's the truth from my end. I'm sure it was something else was going on the other end, but I found myself in Wales, in the UK, and I found out that university professor there had written an academic book about Bruce Lee. And one of the chapters, he was tearing apart something I wrote. And I didn't know it, right? So I'm like, oh, no way, check that out. So I was like, I'm already here. So I went up to the guy's office hours, knocked on the door, and I could swear that, again, this is my version of it, that in his mind, he was like, oh, damn, this guy found out and he came to kill me. He came to eat me just to... I've watched The Godfather 53 times. I know how these guys are. He came to kill me. So he was super nice to me. He's like, no, I really actually love your stuff. Da, 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 da. Long story short, a few months go by and I get this call and I'm like, oh, yeah, this university professor from Wales recommended you as a great guy who would have philosophical insights about Bruce Lee. Do you want to be part of the documentary tomorrow? And I'm like, sure, let's roll. You know, they had just interviewed Kobe Bryant for it, and they were like, oh, we have a spot right after Kobe. I'm like, let me think about it long, hard. If yeah, okay. So it was fun.
I remember when it came on, I DVR'd it, and I didn't know you were in it, and I'm sitting there watching, and I was like, what is Daniele doing in here? And you had multiple, like, they used a lot of your stuff. So not only did they, because I'm sure they interviewed tons of people that they didn't use, that, you know, left on the cutting room floor. So not only did they want your opinion, they used it. So if you would have gotten into that guy's office, or what was your plan going into that guy's office, I should say? What if he would have stood up for it and said, like, in that, if he said he was knocking your stuff, what was your plan going in?
I had no plan. It was kind of like just a feel for who the guy is. Yeah, maybe. Keep all the options open, right?
Got to be flexible, right? Just like you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
And look what it got you into one of the greatest documentaries ever. Even if you're not a Bruce Lee fan, you would have to love seeing the message and seeing how that was done too, man. Yep. If for anyone that hasn't seen it, I would suggest checking it out. I would think it would, if you're not big into Bruce Lee, it will make you want to start Googling Bruce Lee videos and his teachings and everything he's done, because what a crazy, awesome life that dude had, taken way too young, it seems, obviously, just like a lot of the greats, man. Were you always a big fan of his?
Yeah, I mean, I dug his stuff when I was a kid, and so definitely I liked him. It's funny because when I ask people, do you know, and some big, huge name, there will always be a bunch of people who know that person and a bunch who don't. Bruce Lee is probably the only guy that I've ever asked the question, and I never run into somebody who say, Bruce who? I never heard of him. It's like everybody knows Bruce Lee. There just no now, which is like ridiculous because it's 40 years after his death, people are still, everybody know who Bruce Lee is. I don't think there are too many cases of that level of enduring fame. Even like some of the top actors, you're going to find people who never heard of them. Bruce Lee somehow transcended all that and is really hit a chord in a powerful way in a lot of people. And one thing that I really appreciated about doing the documentary is that I got to meet Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon. And then Shannon was actually one of the first guests on my podcast. And we had a blast. We had a great conversation. Shannon was super sweet. She's a really nice lady. And she was nice enough. She wrote a little blurb for one of my books. Because one book that I did, Create Your Own Religion, I was kind of using the Bruce Lee approach, the way he approached martial arts of not being dogmatic and taking the best from different styles. I was sort of doing the same thing with religious ideas. And Shannon was nice enough to write a heartfelt blurb where she really read the whole thing, and we talked about it, and we had... So I was very back to those degrees of separation where I feel like everything is clicking in weird ways. It's like one day you are in some guy's office in Wales, and then you end up in the I Am Bruce Lee documentary, and that you meet Shannon Lee, then you record a podcast. Then it's like, oh, this is all so bizarre.
That's right. It's crazy how that works. One day you're going in to possibly choke a guy out that debated something or disagreed with some of your writing, and the next thing you know, it opens up all kind of doors for your life. So all that work your whole life of martial arts and all your flexibility, like you said, in every situation, being able to adapt. That's a great example of going and taking something and doing it. You didn't want to sit back. That's almost like a version now of I don't know if you heard of the guy that I don't know when this happened, but some guy, he somehow tracked some of his like haters down on Twitter. Some guy that kept coming after him, and he was like running down the guy's street yelling, and he was tweeting this dude. I think he was some kind of fighter, and he's like running down the street. I know where you are, whatever the guy's handle was. And he's like, I'm coming. And I guess the guy was like knocking on multiple doors, and he was getting closer and closer to this dude. I don't know what ended up happening. That's basically like what you were doing.
Yeah.
The guy knows you're coming. He just start. Oh no, not him.
Yeah,
that is like a nightmare for someone like that, especially. I would have loved it. But you say you're working on another book? What's that one about?
Yeah, what I'm doing now is probably the most personal thing I've ever done. Because, before it was always, I had personal examples, but it's always about the topic. This is, what I'm doing now is a book about fear, and specifically is all personal experiences. There's a whole section that's about my experience of fear in martial art and dealing with fear of, people coming at you to knock your head off kind of thing, and how that affected me and how I dealt with it and all of that. Then there's an element of everything that happened with my wife and, the whole relationship with her, and then everything that happened with her eventually getting a brain tumor, having this whole kind of horrific thing that happened in a really short period of time after we were married for quite a long time. And then there's the third part, which is the afterwards, the, life after kind of all hell has broken loose, and raising my daughter, trying to reinvent who I am to some degree and what I'm going to do with my life and everything else, and how fear plays a role in it. Because, there's definitely, I've overcome some fears, but then, of course, there are others that, even just the experience of seeing what happened with my wife, I realized that now my existential fear about death and all of that kind of stuff is definitely, it hasn't exactly gone away. You see it hit so close to you. Now every little health thing I have, I'm always thinking, okay, I'm about to die right now. It's always, because that's what I've seen. And so it's, so figuring out ways to, but one thing that I've learned, and again, learn is a big word, because I've learned it intellectually and I've applied it some of the time. Some of the time I may remember the words, but I forget it in reality. The one thing that I got from this is the fact that ultimately, you can be the greatest, smartest person in the world. You can be whatever, a million qualities that maybe I do not possess, but even assume like the best human there is, and you're still going to run into crap. Bad stuff is going to happen. The universe will eventually deliver, because everybody eventually, if you live long enough, you get sick, you get old, you die. You see, again, if you are lucky, which means you live long enough, you're going to see a lot of stuff you care about being taken away from you, whether it is loved ones, whether it is your physical health eventually declining, whether it is your whatever ego thing that at one point made you proud eventually goes away like everything else. So that's everybody's life. And the fact that we need to deal with this fact that stuff get to be taken away from us, whether we like it or not, in a way that will dispel any illusion of control that we have, any illusion that if we just play our cards right, then we can avoid suffering and pain. No, that's not the way it works in this life. So it's coming to the realization and in that way banishing the hope that somehow you can escape the sharp fangs of pain, so to speak, forces you then to deal with it. It's like, okay, all my nightmares may come true exactly as I foresee them. Then what? What do I do with it? Do I shoot myself now, or do I find a way to live that despite the fact that, yes, everything can be taken away from me, I can find a way to be happy in this next moment, and the one after that, and the one after that. The one present moment over which you have control over yourself and the people around you, where you can decide how you're going to meet your destiny, and when eventually things turn bad, you're not going to control the outcome, but you can control maybe how you approach it. That part is what I got out of all this. And so that's sort of the center of the book to some degree.
Jeez. Sounds awesome, man. When do you think it might come out?
I'm hoping some point in 2015, because I'm supposed to be finishing it right now, and as because I'm doing too many things. I have such envy for the guys who tell me they are writing a book and that's all they are doing. I'm like, oh my God, that must be awesome. It's like my writing a book is, I have 3 hours today, and then maybe in about 9 days I'll have another 2 hours, and then it's like there's no regularity. It's all like little bits of time here and there. So I'm close to the end. I'm getting close to wrapping it up, but I need to push through a little more. I'm hoping to finish at least the first draft within the next month, and then it has to edit and all of that. So I'm hoping that before the end of 2015 is out.
Man, it sounds awesome. I think was it hard getting that or writing something that personal, because it seems like it's all off of personal experiences. Or was it did it feel good to get it out almost?
Yeah, I think there was something therapeutic about it, something that actually helps me to deal with it. Now, helps me does not mean that it felt good. Like there are parts that you write and you look back and you're like, Jesus, this is heavy, and you go back to feeling some of those emotions. Does not make you feel good all the time, that's for sure, but I felt it necessary, first and foremost for myself. And then one thing that I noticed podcasting is that anytime when I talk in more general theoretical self, some people may get something out of it, but whatever. When I talk in more personal sense, when I bring up real life experience and real things lived through, people seem to get so much more out of it. So I feel like, well, if it can be cathartic for me and it can actually help other people, why not? What else should I focus on? Let's do this. This is what seems to make the most sense. So that's what I wanted to do now. Eventually, long term, I would like to move on to writing fiction. I've written so far only non-fiction. I want to do this, which is clearly non-fiction, but it start using a style that's a little closer to fiction, because there's dialogue, there's things I say, the things other people have said, there's a little more storytelling involved. And then I just want to start switching to fiction for a while.
I'm sure you can come up with your fiction will be amazing. They will have aliens and space chimps, and it's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to that too. But it's that, man, I think you're right, and that's what kind of attracted me to listening to not only your podcast but a lot of them is like, and that's why I listen to a lot of comedians, because they're so honest. I tell people, I'm like, these dudes say stuff that they're broadcasting that's going to be out there forever, that I could never. It blows your mind, and but it makes you keep wanting to come back, because you're like, you have to respect it. I think you have to respect how they're not scared. They don't care. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, this is me. We all have issues. We all have demons. We all are fighting different fights. That doesn't mean we're not happy, but it's just easily relatable. Even if I can't relate directly to whatever one thing they're saying, I can relate to how they were feeling maybe at that moment or whatever. And so that's what this has been cool for me too, is I'm not comfortable like some of those guys are, but it's like, it's true when you can relate. And that's why I love this whole podcasting world, where you can just kind of scroll through and see what you want to listen to, what guests you have, and I'll see like anything. I listened to Arnold Schwarzenegger on someone's podcast, on Chris Hardwick's once, and he was awesome, man. Like, he was so honest and so cool, and it just gives them time to get out like what's real, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why yours is great, man, because it's like you don't seem to, like, to me, like you're not holding anything back. You just tell people what your life is and what you're going through, and I think that's why people love it. And so hopefully we're moving to a more that way. I mean, obviously it's uncomfortable at times for the person doing it and letting people know about their life and like that. Yeah, things happen, to people. And so is that that sounds like that's almost like your book has that same effect, like that. Yeah, all this information's out there and people are presenting it now instead of hiding, like right. This isn't the 50s where no one knows what, John Wayne, I don't know when John Wayne died. No one knows what he's doing. No one knows what kind of issues he had, but I'm sure he had them just like people now. But
of course,
that's like sounds like it's what your book almost is, getting out there. And I know your podcast is. Do you think, is that one of the things that you look for when you're, whatever you're doing in life, and is that when people are relatable?
Yeah, I think it became even more so over the last 3 years, precisely because I went through so much that I felt like, what's the use of playing games? What's the use of trying to keep a certain image?
Hmm.
I'm done with that. It's like, what am I trying to protect here? There's nothing that, again, you're going to experience horrific pain no matter what. So might as well get rid of that extra weight of, I have to uphold a certain public image. I have to pretend that I am something that I'm not. Screw that. And I noticed that, I live a lot better being this way, like being honest with myself, not trying to be something that I'm not. And I noticed that people respond to it so much more. People tend to if they like you a lot more, and more importantly, they like you for actually who you are, as opposed to something that you have to struggle to keep that image going on all the time. And what am I supposed to be like again? Well, let me make sure that I'm acting the part. It's like, screw that. There's not enough time and energy to do that. I find it, and there's something odd enough. One of the curious benefits of this is that I noticed that even in terms of relationship, we play so many games where most guys, and I'm just speaking. I'm sure women do the same thing, but speaking from a man's experience, most men will try to put their best face forward in front of women they are attracted to, and there's a point where I decided, what, screw that. I'm not. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be who I am, and you like me for who I am. That's great. I don't want to play this game. I don't want to, because then you have to live up to it. And 3 months later, you have to be suddenly, when reality kicks in and the real you start showing up more. It's like, hey, but that's not what you showed me at the beginning. It's like, and it's true. Why play this stupid game? It's like, you're gonna dig it if you're gonna dig it. You're not if you're not. I'm not trying to put my bad face forward, but I'm trying to put the entirety of who I am. And either you like it all with the great stuff, the not so great stuff, but let's be honest with each other. Let's cut this crap. I find it so much more rewarding when actually people do like you, because it's like, oh, you see all of me and you actually like me. Wow, I feel honored now. Whereas before it's like, yeah, you like me because I only showed you the good stuff. No wonder, it's like, do you still like me when you start seeing the parts that are a little more problematic? And I find being honest with oneself really liberating. It feels so much lighter and better.
It has to. It's got to be. I always talk about trying to be authentic, and people can see right through it. Like these fake leaders or whatever. I mean, we know. I feel like I can see that in other people, and I know if I'm trying to do that myself, I'm like, man, what am I doing? No, come on. And I always think about, what would my dad or my brother? I was like, my brothers would disown me right now. And luckily, I don't have many moments like that, but I have where I'm like, oh gosh, like if you say a stupid comment that you thought was cool at the time or at the moment, you're like, oh man. But I always use the example of, I think it's a good thing. It's going to come out. It's going to sound like I'm saying this is a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing. I tell my wife and my sister-in-law were in town. My sister-in-law was in town this weekend, and someone posted a picture of them together. And my sister-in-law was like, oh, I don't like that picture. I don't like me in that picture. Oh, my hair or whatever. And I was like, listen, there's these big old hefty girls that post themselves all over Instagram and Facebook wearing like nothing, wearing like bikinis, and they don't seem to. They posted for everybody to see, and this picture's just going to like your group of friends that you've said is okay to look at it. I was like, there's something that I'm like, yeah, sure, they might want to put a couple more pieces of clothing on, but you know what? No, if they're okay with it, I think it's cool. Like I was like, either these girls have just crazy amount of self-confidence, or they just don't care. Like, hey, this is me, this is it. And it's almost like, it's cool to see that. I think maybe not cool to look at, but it's cool to see that. It's cool to see that confidence, or that just lack of worrying about it. I think because if everyone could do that, it'd be cool. I think everyone would be a lot happier, And I don't know how that is. I don't know if that's like a new generation thing or whatever, but I seem to see that more and more now, where people don't care. Like they don't care if they're not perfectly, girls makeup and hair done, and guys don't. Well, I don't know about guys, what they do, but you know what I'm saying. Like, so yeah, I try to use that, and it's hopefully where we're moving. Moving forward with all this, with everything's out there, everything's public now. So hopefully, nothing will like come back to haunt people, like 10, 15 years down the road if someone posted something stupid when they were 14 years old, because kids have this.
That made you who you are. So if you are happy with who you are today, even the stupid stuff you have done in the past, that's part of the experience. It does not mean that I would redo it right now, but hey, that led to me now. So it's being able to embrace all of yourself, including the parts that maybe, if there was a time machine, maybe you would change, but again, you can't. So, hey, embrace it, accept the fact that this led to where you are today. And the beauty of this is that once we're honest with ourselves, it becomes so much easier to change those things that we are ashamed of. If the things we're ashamed of, we hide them away, then we are not looking at them, which means that nobody's going to pay attention to actually fixing them. If we are honest with ourselves and we accept ourselves who we are, does not mean being lazy and then say, oh, those are my limitations, too bad, deal with it, I'm never going to do a tiny thing to change them. No, if I see them and I see their limitations, I accept that that's where I'm at, but that does not mean that I'm not going to actually put some attention in trying to fix them, if I can, or limit how something that I don't like, can I just shave 30% of that? Maybe I can change my nature, but can I limit the more annoying aspects of that stuff? If you're honest, you can do it because you're staring at it and you see the limitations. If you're not honest, it will be with you forever. It's kind of like what we were saying before. If you're willing to accept somebody else's idea, that suddenly you win because you just improve what you were thinking a minute ago, if their idea turns out to be a good one. It's the same thing with oneself. Being honest with oneself is the foundation to improving oneself.
Very true. It's very hard. It's hard for a lot of people to be honest with yourself, and I'm guilty of it. Everyone is, I think, when you want to think, it's not my fault. Someone else screwed me or whatever. Yeah. That's easy to do, but then if you can find a way to step back, and I always try to think of like looking at it from afar, like everything. If you zoom out on anything, like to use a stupid football example, like if you zoom out, like say you're down on the field watching a game or something. And I used to see this. I remember when I was a young kid and I'd watch our high school play. I'd be down the field like, oh, my God, these guys are killing each other. It's unbelievable how hard they're hitting. But if then you go up in the stands, you're like, it looks a little bit slower. And then I think, like, if I went up in a blimp and you're watching, it's like nothing. Like, when you fly over something and you're in a plane and you look at it like say it's a huge game with 100,000 people there, it looks like nothing. You're like, oh, that's cool. It looks whatever. And then the more you would zoom in, it just gets crazier and more intense. I always try to think about in my head, I'm like, if I could just like zoom out and look at this situation and look how big of an idiot I am and realize that I'm not, I always think about that, but it doesn't mean I'm doing it. I'm trying. Everyone tries, Doesn't always happen.
That's what you're describing is a Buddhist practice that's about playing, kind of looking at what you're involving in the third person, sort of looking at yourself as if you are not yourself. So you're looking at, that guy is doing this and that, and not identifying with it, acknowledging what's going on without it reduces your ego response to it all and allow you to see the situation for what it is, including the stupid stuff you're doing. And in some way, it also helps you take it less seriously when you are so wrapped up into something. It's like, yes, that's good, but take a deep breath here. It's like there's also on a grander scale what you're doing right now that you think is the end of the world is really not such a big deal.
Definitely not, and I don't want to get that confused with speaking in the third person, Daniele, because that
would be problematic.
That is a big issue. Yes. I've not done that. There's a mistake I have not made, and I, knock on wood, I will hope to not ever make that one because that is one of the worst. Nothing. Well, Daniele, I'm going to let you roll, man. You been super generous. Thank you so much for coming on here, man. I know you're a family man. You got to write a book. Got to write another book. Was it your fifth going to be?
This one is the fourth. So the one I'm working right now is the fourth. Fifth, hopefully, is going to be fiction.
Oh my gosh! Well, we'll be looking forward to that. What's your Twitter name? D Bolelli.
D Bolelli. So my initial D as in Daniel, the first initial D, and then last name Bolelli, which is B as in boy, Olelli.
All right. Yeah, we'll put it. Well, my buddy Todd, who runs the website, he'll put it up under your face during the talk. He'll let people know. But I think it'll be cool people that maybe aren't super aware of you to hear who's this guy with this crazy accent on here talking about talking in the third person and
That's right.
speaking circles around AJ. It'd be great. So yeah, I think it's fun, man. I'm really happy you came on, and I'll be looking forward to everything you do in the future, and I'll be listening to your podcast, The Drunken. Would I pronounce it Taoist or Taoist?
In Chinese, it's kind of in between, so it's whatever,
All right, I don't.
Taoist, whatever
So
one.
anyone that was questioning me when I said Taoist earlier, because that's how it's with a T. How you spell it?
Exactly.
You guys didn't know either. I'm just letting you know. You guys were questioning. I was questioning it, but I just picked one and went with it. So people questioned me. But yeah, it's a great podcast for anyone that doesn't want to or that has not heard it yet. It's great. You get to hear Daniele talk with many guests. Sometimes you don't have them. Sometimes you have random people in there with you. It's just cool to hear your views on all kinds of things. So really respect that.
Whenever you make it to Cali, hopefully we get you on.
Hey, I'd love to come. I don't know what I'm going to talk about on yours, but yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great to come on there, and I'll just ask you questions again like I did tonight.
I know. I was actually thinking about it. I'm like, man, I can't believe how smooth you are in flowing from one thing to another. I was thinking, if you come on mine, please, you run it because you're doing it too well. So I'm like,
no. See, that's the funny thing is, like my brother, my dad, and them, they watch these and they listen to them, and they know about you. And I was telling them I was going to have you on. They're like, "What? Are you serious? How did you get that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And like, what are you going to talk to him about? It's like, I honestly don't know. I was like, he has so many things he does. I'm a curious little guy, you know. I say it all the time. So it's like, I try to think, how would my daughter ask you questions? You know.
I love that. So, look, it's perfect. This couldn't flow any better.
Oh yeah, man. Well, thanks again, Daniele Bolelli. Check him out. His fourth book will be coming out sometime in 2015, most likely, if I don't bug him and keep him on a podcast for 2 hours late at night after he puts his daughter to bed. But once again, appreciate you, Daniele, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining in. Please visit thehawkcast.com, where you can discover the next guest, get a little more information about why this exists, watch past episodes, or link over to iTunes. And tell some friends too, so we can all hear more great stories together.